Fox 17 Rock Interview. My buddy Andy Powers, gifted master luthier for Taylor guitars, surfer, father of two, fly fisherman, and you're doing some good work here, Andy.
Thank you.
We were talking off camera about some of the new innovations and everything you've been doing with the Taylor guitars, and really actually putting your blood and sweat into these as you work on some of these.
There's been a few nicked fingers there, here and there.
But the new stuff you're coming out with, you just came off of Summer Namm last week, which obviously, the room was just packed the whole time with everybody coming to see the new instruments, and this is the new 700 series. And what a gorgeous instrument.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's fun at Taylor because all of our guitars start in a real traditional way. So unfortunately, there are some nicked fingers and a couple little, we'll say a little DNA on the inside of some of these guitars. But what we love to do is build an instrument that has a personality.
Right.
Every musician is as unique as their own fingerprints, their approach to music. So we don't believe that one size fits everyone. So we have something like this 700 series that has a totally different personality than a lot of the other rosewood and spruce guitars that we've built in the past. Has a real rugged, fundamental, strong, almost an outgoing kind of extroverted personality of a
But the sound is so balanced.
Guitar. Yeah, balance is one of the important things that's just always useful.
There's no muddiness. As soon as you pulled it out of the case a while ago and we were in studio, the first thing to my ear was that it was not too bassy, it was not too mid-rangey, it was just balanced.
Yeah.
And that's a tough area to strike.
It's real challenging, but that's one of the attributes that makes an instrument feel at home and feel approachable to a musician, is when they don't have to adjust their technique to suit the idiosyncrasies of a guitar, they can just play and express their music. That's one of the signs of a great instrument.
Well, I think it's so great too. We were talking, off camera to where, you actually, as you're building these out, whether it's in the shop or at your home shop, and you're doing it with old world craftsmanship as you build, and not just innovations for the sake of it, but to make them better. And then you take them to your gigs and try them out with the different bands that you play with the songwriter bands, and actually try them out in the real world.
Yeah, we always have to keep in mind, these are instruments built by musicians and guitar makers for musicians. So in that way, we need to know, hey, this is really going to work. And for me as a player, I've always had the luxury of being able to road test something and realize, I don't have to translate this. I don't have to try and explain this away. I know exactly what I'm going to change on the next guitar I build.
Yeah.
So by the time we get to offer these to musicians, this guitar, it's been through its paces, and we know that thing's going to work in a lot of musical environments.
Well, and I can see the 700 series especially working for so many, Nashville musicians, well, anywhere, but it's just, with the slot headstock, with the way you've got it set up, with the soft shoulders, with the nice binding, the pick guard, everything plays well.
Yeah, all the attributes need to kind of affirm each other. So it sounds the way it looks and it looks the way it feels. It's got to be a whole cohesive instrument. And then, there's a practical aspect as well, because most of these guitars are being fitted with our new ES2 pickup system.
Which I think sounds incredible.
Yeah, it's the most plug-in and play-friendly acoustic guitar pickup I've ever tried. It's
very open.
Yeah, real open. It's not fussy.
Now, are you also putting in the new Taylor Sense electronics in these?
We're just starting to introduce those into a handful of models, as well as making them available as a retrofit.
Which is incredible technology.
Yeah. So
as you explained to me at Winter Namm, to where, you can basically check in on your guitar, via your smartphone.
It's kind of like a quick checkup for your guitar's vital signs.
Yeah.
Like, I left it in the car. It's getting too hot. Yeah. I got to go run out and get that thing
humidity
before the check comes.
Humidity level's too low.
Yeah. Especially for a touring musician or somebody who's traveling around into different climates, that makes it really easy to know how their instrument is going to hold up and what they need to do. Just little things to make sure that when they step out on stage, the guitar is working the way they hope it.
Exactly. Well, speaking of which, you also brought with you, Andy, the 800 Deluxe. And I got to tell you, holding this thing, this bevel is just amazing here. And it's not extreme, but it takes that hard edge off that you always get when you put your arm on a guitar.
Yeah, this is our new series. We call it the 800 Deluxe. So it's basically, call it the chassis of an 800 series, but improved a little bit. Because really the sound that we hear out of instruments, it's never the guitar itself. It's never just the hands of the musician.
Right.
It's the relationship between the two. So in this way, this guitar ends up sounding really good because the person who picks it up to perform on it is comfortable.
Very.
This having what we call this radiused armrest, it's just enough to ease the shoulder strain, not, kind of hit you on your articulation hand.
Yeah.
And so your right hand or left hand, if you're a left-handed
Right,
player,
right.
I guess, your articulation hand is really loose, really comfortable. You can hold that thing for hours and never get the strain that you would get.
Well, I think it goes to ergonomics. And we were talking, to me, it sort of reminds me of it's like those little features you see on a BMW. It's like going, wow. It's like, why didn't somebody else do it? And it's not the extreme, like I've seen on some.
Extremes are not good.
Right, and I always worried, obviously, as a musician too, to where it's like, how does that affect the sound? Whereas this is just a slight bit, and it feels incredible. It's very comfortable to hold.
What we see is that players who pick up that instrument end up with a little better dexterity. They have a little more agility.
I could tell it.
And so their performance ends up enhanced
Yeah.
because, man, they're just more comfortable. They can approach that guitar in a new, fresh way.
It's beautiful, and then I appreciate that you also brought a 12-string instrument with you, the 562, which I'm a big fan of 12 strings. And now this has the new electronics also, right?
It does. It has the expression system too. The whole philosophy behind that guitar really was driven by the idea that we wanted to build a 12-string guitar for a 6-string player.
Right.
Because it's fairly unconventional in the world of 12-string
It
guitars
really is.
that typically are built around a real big body with
Yeah.
a big long neck and big headstock. Now this is that guitar has a 12-fret neck, a relatively short scale length,
Right.
but is built in the frame of our smallest body shape, the Grand Concert. Now when we build that instrument, we start kind of stacking up things that are working for you,
Right.
both as a player and a builder. So you end up with a 12-string guitar that naturally wants to play in tune, naturally wants to be balanced. It emphasizes that articulate, chimey, shimmery kind of response.
I totally agree. And to me, even though I play a lot of 12-string, it plays much more like a 6. You know what I mean? I don't have to, it doesn't have the fight.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times for the 12, when you go into it, you're going to have some fight.
Yeah, it's good. They can be daunting instruments.
Yeah.
I mean, they're big,
Especially
they're
with the
physically
size,
imposing, they're oftentimes pretty challenging on your fretting hand. And those were the kinds of elements that we wanted to address in this instrument.
Well, it's incredible. I think you've done it. Now, let's also, we've been talking about the great new Taylors and everything that you've come out with at the Summer Namm show. How's your surfing been doing?
Lately the surf has been pretty good. We've had a series of Southern Hemisphere swells that have been sweeping up the West Coast, and it's been a good time lately, as a matter of fact.
So now, do you get some of your best guitar ideas, like when you're out on the water, like when just relaxing?
Yeah, oftentimes I'll between the shop and my home, I'll stop and have a surf and think about the work that I was doing over the course of the day. And usually that means by the time I get back home, I go right back out into the shop and go, I've got it. I know what we need to work on.
That's so great.
So that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. It's, in Southern California, the ocean is really our wilderness. That's where we get to go to have our walk in the woods, so to speak.
Well, and like you and I were talking off camera earlier too, Andy, I feel like, and Taylor guitars, what Bob launched and everything in 1974, that was a huge deal back then. And it seems like now you're kind of bringing a new renaissance to Taylor guitars.
Yeah, having the background of a traditional one-man shop, I love this almost, at first it seems like a juxtaposition of very traditional old world craftsmanship. I mean, chisels and hand planes and pots of glue on the bench and all that.
Right.
But you realize that's where great instruments come from.
Exactly.
It's both an art and a science. It's an intuitive process. And as a traditional builder, we'll build these instruments, but then use the best tools that we have available to us to make sure that, we're going to produce these in a very consistent way that makes it approachable for a musician.
And I think that's why the Taylor instruments have continuously been such a huge hit with playing musicians. They're out there in the field, at gigs, on tour, at church, at home. Something where you have your go-to.
Yeah, the real intent behind all these instruments is we want people to include playing music as part of their life. We want to sort of contribute to the artfulness in a person's life, whether they're struggling over their first 2 chords
Right.
or whether they're a seasoned pro. It doesn't matter. The point is to play music and get to enjoy that aspect of life.
Well, I'll tell you what, Andy, you continue to do incredible work.
Thank you.
And be sure and check out the new Taylor instruments. Andy Powers, Master Luthier, the new 700 series, the 800 Deluxe, and we've got the 56212. Very impressed, as always. And I appreciate you coming on and showing these to our viewers. And be sure and check out Taylor Guitars online as well. Thanks for watching the Fox 17 Rock and Review.